Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and happy belated Common App Day. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. We know from the last time we ran this webinar that many of you are going to have questions about how you tackle different parts of this application that has just come online for rising seniors this past weekend. So we want to make sure that we give ourselves and you as much time to answer as many questions as possible. To start off, my name is Alyssa Coltrain. I am the Director of College Admissions for Ivy Experience, and I am joined here by my fabulous experts, essay specialists, former admissions officers, Jordan Holmes and Kevin Trudel. We are all part of Ivy Experience. We were founded in 2010 as a comprehensive college counseling company, advising students on everything from SAT and ACT prep to academics and extracurricular activities to coaching on essays and applications, which will be the focus of tonight and more. We've grown exclusively through word of mouth referrals and seminars exactly like this one. And we've worked with students at this point across more than 40 states and 20 countries. So what we'll be tackling today will be the Common App, but I first want to start off by placing this in context of the full admissions process. And for any of you who have attended our webinars before, this slide about the 6 factors under your control is going to look pretty familiar, and we return to it time and time again to give students a grounding of what they should be thinking about. There are a lot of things out of control in this process. The institutional priorities of a given college or university, the decisions that state or federal legislature make, what other students in your school are doing or where they're applying, or even the mood of the admissions officer who happens to be reading your essay. So any of that time and energy or frustration that is being directed to those things, we're going to focus in on these 6. Grades and rigor, the grades you get in the classes, the difficulty of the classes you take, standardized tests, the SAT, the ACT, when you take them and if you send those scores and where you send those scores, letters of recommendation from junior year teachers, your extracurricular activities, essays and applications are focused tonight, as well as, and this 6 factor has that little asterisk next to it because although it does not affect your chances of admission at a given school, it affects the choices you'll have at the end of this process, the composition of your college list. So as we jump into talking through the Common App, this is what sort of the context that we'll be operating in. So let's start off by going, what is the Common App? So it is a centralized or common portal for all college applications. It is commonapp.org. There is an actual app in the sense of phone app that you can download. We don't recommend using it. It's a little janky. This is something that you want to do on a browser. It is the centralized application for the vast majority, but not all, colleges and universities in the United States. There are a select handful of institutions, fewer now that Georgetown has joined the ranks of the Common App, but there are a select number of institutions that use their own application. MIT and the University of California system are sort of the biggest numbers there, but almost every American student applying to college is going to be applying to at least one school, probably more, on this application. So it officially opens for the application season beginning on August 1st. So rising seniors, if you've looked at the Common App, yesterday or today, that is what the application will look like as you are applying to school. But that being said, not much tends to change from year to year. We had a couple of big updates last year. This update seems to have been a little bit more subtle. We see some wording changes here and there, but not much has changed. And in that application, you're going to have 6 to 7 tabs for the baseline application, as well as supplemental questions for your specific schools. And these can range from things as small as to, are you applying to fall 2027? Are you an in-state resident? To actual school-specific essays. Um, on our next slide, you can see a little bit of what that is going to look like today. And when it comes to creating your account, this is something that you can do at any time. I see some rising juniors in the audience as well. You can go ahead and create a Common App account, poke around in it, even fill out some of the My Common Application section, but leave the My Colleges section unfilled. So you can do this at any time. We do recommend, however, that students use a personal but professional sounding email. You can always create a new Gmail account, your first name dot your last name or something like that if the account you use with your friends is maybe a little too casual for an admissions officer to see it. But we advise using a personal email so that you ensure that this is an email address that you will have access to after you graduate from high school when you may lose access to your account. So once we've got our account set up, we're going to go ahead and start filling this out. The first two sections that we're going to talk about today are going to be the profile and family sections. These are contact, demographic, and personal information. This is something that we absolutely advise parents and students sit down together to fill out in order to verify that everything is accurate. The other big point that we want to highlight here is supplying your social security number is a optional field in the Common App. You do not have to provide it. So some families may go, this seems like a personally identifying piece of information. We're not going to do this. However, if you are planning on filling out the FAFSA and, applying for seeing what you might get as far as federal student aid, grants or loans, anything of that matter, you must enter your social security number into Common App because that is how those two systems talk to each other, and the schools to which you've applied through Common App are going to be able to look at your FAFSA, make their calculations, and provide you with a financial aid package. Next up, we're going to have the education section. This is where you can provide information about your high school, the courses that you're taking, your grades, as well as academic honors. You are going to want to speak with your school counselor if you have any question about this section. There are some tricky details here about, precisely how a school calculates grade, how many students are in a graduating class. This is exactly the kind of information that your school counselor should be able to provide for you. Another note we want to highlight here for our rising seniors, your current year classes are your senior year classes, the classes that you are going to begin taking for our families in Texas within the next couple of days, potentially for those of us on the East Coast a little bit later. But the courses that you will start taking soon are your current year courses as far as your Common App goes. This is also one of the sections where you might encounter one of four optional sections. There are two here. Jordan later on will talk to us about the two other optional sections. But if you have transferred high schools, or if you have had a change in progression, by which we mean you have skipped a grade, redone a grade, or taken a gap year, selecting these options will open up a section in the Education tab for you to provide additional information and clarity on why these particular instances took place. And that can be as simple as my parent got a new job and we moved to a different school district to something more complicated. For our students who are in the audience, this is something you should absolutely talk to us about. We would love to help you with it. Our final section in the education section is going to be honors. This is primarily going to be for academic honors only. If you have a PR in track, you have won MVP on your football team, these awards are going to go in the activities section. And I believe that's something that Kevin's going to be able to talk to us a little bit. This is specifically for educational honors, which can include honor roll, AP Scholar. There's a couple of other awards that College Board has been giving out. This also can be a good place to put National Honor Society, depending on your level of involvement. There are many high schools that induct members at the very, very end of junior year or the very beginning of senior year, and we field questions from students going, well, I haven't actually done anything. Do I put it in the activities section? If you're in that position and what you're really looking to do is simply highlight your academic qualifications that brought you to the position where you could do this, this is a great place to put National Honor Society. That being said, for National Honor Society or any other honor, please be sure to choose the level appropriately. This is essentially the students that you were competing against for this award. Even though National Honor Society says national, it is a chapter where you are, selected out of your high school peers. This is a school level award. So we've burned through the first three sections of this, the Common App, fairly quickly. In many ways, these are the most straightforward, but at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to talk to us about testing and activities. A final housekeeping note before I do. I see a couple of people have already found it, but please feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A section. We'll hang out for as long as we can after the end of the presentation to address any comments and questions that you have. Kevin, all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Alyssa indicated, one of those tabs, one of those sections in the Common Application is testing. With that in mind, it's in that place that you're going to report your AP scores, your ACT scores, or your SAT scores. Now, as you can kind of see as a note here, for some schools, they still will need an official SAT or ACT score, meaning that they may need an official test report from ACT or College Board regarding that, right? So make sure to check for the schools at which you're applying to see what they need, because you may need to do that additional step of follow-up. Now, something that has come up in the past year, last year, we had a new section on the ACT Science. Now, with that said, that science section is largely optional. In that almost every school views it as an optional section, but you need to be aware of which schools on your list do or don't require that section. And also be aware of the fact that your science score on that ACT science section also affects your composite score for the overall ACT. Okay. So obviously we can provide, as college counselors here at Ivy Experience, any advice on that, any advice on test optional. But there are, just gives you guys some context, a handful of schools where the optional doesn't apply. These are exceptions. These are not the rule. Okay. So while Pomona and Marquette are test optional institutions overall, if you are sending an ACT there, you will have to send the ACT Science. They want that score. Otherwise, there are a handful of schools, RIT, Michigan State, Duke, and Georgetown, that recommend that section. For almost pretty much every place else, it is an optional section.
Yes.
So,
As a quick note of clarification, the ACT Science section itself is not new, but it was newly made optional as of last year.
Sorry, I should have got up in my phrasing there. Appreciate that, Alyssa. So that's the testing section. Moving on to the activity section. So that is a section where you can talk about all the things that you've done in high school, whether that's playing a varsity sport, being in a club, or something you were involved in the community or as a hobby. Okay. Now, one of the most common things students and families wonder about when they're filling out that activity section is, what order do I even put these things in? I have these handful of things I've done. Where do I even start? Don't worry too much about that. Essentially, you can start thinking about, areas where you spent the most time, areas that have the most meaning. But the only important thing you need to keep in mind there is don't bury the lead. What does that mean? Don't bury the lead means the most important activities that you've been involved in shouldn't be 9th or 10th. I guess I should have done as a housekeeping note, there are 10 potential activities you can include in this section. And if there is, for example, if you are an athlete, that is a major part of your life, you play club and varsity soccer, right? You spend dozens of hours every week on it. You've done it all 4 years. It shouldn't be your 10th activity. So don't bury the lead. That is an important thing in your life. That should be towards the top. But beyond that, don't sweat it. If an activity is 4th or 5th, it's not going to affect your admissions outcome. Something we do suggest is that you do review this section as a family, because certain things do get missed. Certain things students maybe don't think of, that maybe things they did in the community that it didn't occur to them, right? And having family there to follow up and check and do that collective memory is helpful for this section. Something we also do want to point out as well is a newer section. Here is the responsibilities and circumstances section. All that is, as you can kind of see from the screenshot here on the slide deck, is that it's just an opportunity to provide context. If you had spent a significant amount of time helping with something in the home, I think examples are things that you see on the screen, right? Like maybe you had a family member who was dealing with a health issue and that you had to do a lot of caretaking, set up doctor's appointments, right? Maybe you have a family member or parent who doesn't speak English well, and there's certain things you had to help with there. Or maybe, hey, you had to do a lot of work to even pay rent and take care of household responsibilities. Those are all great things that you can use. Those are all things that can go in this section to provide context to admissions officers. Now, as far as the individual activities themselves, so, hey, I have a sense of my overall activities. I'm thinking about what did I do individually, right? How do I go about writing this? So first off, in that activity section, we're going to have a space for describing your position, a space describing the organization that you're a part of, and a space describing the description. And then a bunch of things you have to click and indicate you're involved with, how many hours, stuff like that. Now, as far as the description, you want to write that in a resume format, be specific. All that means is that you shouldn't be writing full sentences because you only have 150 characters to work with. So if you're writing in full sentences, you're not even going to get that first full sentence out before you're out of space describing this activity, right? And so we've provided an example here where, a student, they coach 10 to 12 students. It's kind of that bullet point clip format using dependent on verbs, right? They manage equipment and schedule, communicate with parents, they maintain the Instagram of the club, and donated proceeds to the Red Cross. So as I mentioned before, there's additional sections. You want to use those wisely. Those are all opportunities to get across information given that you do have limited space to work with, right? Here you see kind of examples of position. So that is opportunity not only to describe what your role was in an activity, but to provide context for progression and leadership, right? In the example we have here, if someone was, say, wrote for their school newspaper, maybe there was progression there, right? In 10th and 11th grade, they were the opinion editor. In 12th grade, they were the editor-in-chief. So you want to provide context for all those positions. And the way you can differentiate that progression is by using the grade years as we have done in this example. Finally, for the organization name, where this can be really important is, and using this full section can be very important, is when it's unclear to a random admissions rater in a different part of the country what that organization even is, right? Maybe Team Laughter has a major presence in your hometown, but if I'm sitting in Dayton, Ohio, I may have no idea what Team Laughter is. It may be like an improv group for all I know, right? So the way you can provide that context is using a comma, and then hopping in and providing context for what that organization even does. So hopefully these tips will help you kind of as you fill out this activity section. Once again, we do provide guidance here at Ivy Experience as far as how to do that as part of our overall service. Now, moving on to one of the next sections in the Common App, the one that tends to get the most attention, which is the essay, the writing section, and I will hand things off to Jordan to explain to you what that is.
Yeah, the writing section is definitely the one that gets a lot of press for sure, but everything is important. But the essay section, the writing section especially is as well. On the right here, you'll see the 7 prompts that are provided on the Common Application. These have changed once in the past decade or so. So even rising juniors, you can start to think about potential personal statement or Common Application essay topics right now. However, these are just guidelines. They're there for you to give you an idea as to what sort of things admission officers are looking for. However, I can say from being a former admission officer, I never thought twice about the prompts. I was really concerned with what students were writing. So it's really important to highlight who you are and what's important to you. But again, these are the 7 prompts that are there on the Common Application. If a student submits any topic on any sort of prompt that's here, that's completely okay. In fact, Common App actually released some data as far as what the most popular essay prompt was, and it was actually share an essay on the topic of your choice. So truly, it does not matter which one you choose, just choose one that showcases who you are as a human being. We recommend that students write their essay elsewhere, maybe on a Google Doc, on a Word doc, whatever it might be. Read it, edit it, cut it down to whatever you need it to do. Also read it out loud. Make sure that you're not tripping over your words, that phrasing isn't strange or things like that, just as a proofreading piece of advice there. And then copy it directly into the box in the writing section on the Common Application. You will have an option to link to a Google Drive file. That doesn't always work. So we do not recommend doing that. There's a box that you can copy and paste directly into the Common Application. And that's how you can submit your Common Application essay at that point. This is the required writing section. You do have to submit something here. However, there are a few optional sections, including the additional information section. This is a piece of additional information that you can send to every single school that you're applying to, just like that first essay that will go to every single school. This will also go to every single school that you're applying to on the Common Application. This is where you have 300 words maximum to showcase something that is not elsewhere on your application, but only to give additional context. Maybe, as Kevin was saying, you have 10 slots on the Common Application, but you have an 11th activity that's really, really important to you, but it just didn't make the cut. This is where you can put that piece of information. Follow the same guidelines, use that resume activity language, make sure that you're being really specific about your involvements and things like that. But the additional information section is there for you to showcase something that is not already on your application, or at least to give additional context to it as well. This can also be to maybe explain a grading situation, that maybe there was a missing grade or something like that that didn't happen in your teacher's grade book. Or maybe there's a scheduling issue and you couldn't take AP Physics C in 11th grade, so you chose AP Biology instead. Anything like that, anything that an admission officer wouldn't already know just by looking at your application will be really helpful to use it. When you should not use it is to provide an additional why I want to study business, or back in the day when it used to be 650 words, sometimes students will put an entire other essay in there. Please don't do that. From a former admission officer to all of you, please do not do that, because what you put down in your writing section that's required is enough. This is really for those short, direct, additional pieces of information that you could provide context to your high school experience. The other optional section that's a little bit newer is called the Challenges and Circumstances section. And this is actually splitting out from the additional information section. Whereas again, the additional info is a little bit more informational based. This is a little bit more personal. So as Kevin was saying before with the sort of responsibilities and circumstances section, that's where you can do some check boxes. But this is where you can actually write about what those situations were going on. Maybe you broke a bone in 10th grade and you were hobbling around on crutches after you got back to school, but you were out of school for a week and a half. Maybe you were affected by a natural disaster and you were out of school for a month and you had to go online, but the Wi-Fi was unreliable. These are the types of situations that are appropriate to put in the challenges and circumstances section. But it's really important to emphasize the first word of that header there, that it is optional. 90% of our students do not use any sort of piece of information here or in the additional information section. So do not feel like you have to use it. But again, if there are circumstances that go above and beyond and are not immediately apparent based on your application and what the admission officer is reading, this is the place to put it here for sure. The next section is called the courses and grades section. Now, it's important to know that not every single school requires a section. However, some do, which means that you'll have to have your transcript in front of you, and you'll be asked to enter into your transcript into the Common Application in this section, where you'll go through course by course, year by year, to showcase not only the course you were taking, but also the amount of credits, how long you were taking it, and also the grades, of course, that you got. It's also important to know that some schools will do this on a third-party app. This is called the STARS record. And a lot of schools, particularly public schools in the South for the most part, will be requiring students to do the same thing, but just on a separate portal. So it's really, really important to take a look at those admission websites and make sure that there are not some additional pieces that you'll have to fill out after you submit the Common Application. That is a required part of the application that you absolutely have to do if the school requires it. Don't make it up either. Don't use your best guesses. Please have your transcript right in front of you when you're doing it. You should match your transcript exactly, because if you're admitted to that school, then you do have to submit your final transcript, and universities and admission officers will be comparing the two. So again, just make sure that you're reporting it as accurately as you can. Ask your counselor if you have questions, your school counselor, that I should say, if you have questions about the courses and grades section or the STARS record, because they're going to be the best resources for knowing the ins and outs of your offerings and the courses at your school specifically. Moving right along to the schools tab. So when you go into the Common Application, there is the general tab that the Common Application absolutely has for every college you're going to be applying to. Then as you start to add specific schools to your list, there's going to be the schools tab that pops up. And those are the questions that Alyssa was talking about earlier. They're going to be asking, what term are you applying to? What major are you applying to? Things like that. Within that, there will be the letters of recommendation section in that schools tab. And that's where you can assign the recommenders that you have already asked. Hopefully, if you are a rising senior, you have already asked those recommenders. And if you haven't, you're emailing them directly after this webinar. Great. To make sure that you are submitting the correct number and the correct orientation of those letters of recommendation. For the most part, you should be asking at least 2 core subject teachers from your junior year or at least later, who also knows you well. And that's the important part. Because remember, the letters of recommendation are there to showcase who you are as a community member, as somebody in the classroom. If you just go and sit there and you get an A, great. But again, choose a recommender that actually knows who you are. Each school will also differ on what they require. Some schools will ask for that core teacher. Some schools say, send us whatever you would like to. Some schools say, send us 3 recommendations, including a counselor. So it really will depend on the school that you're applying to. But in that schools tab, that is where you will assign each of the recommenders to go to that school. There is a section where you have to waive your FERPA rights, which means that you are waiving the right to see the letter before you send it off to that institution. That assures the institution that you, or rather that letter is objective, it's straightforward, and they can trust what's in it, and that you haven't checked everything that's on it to say, yes, this paints me in the best light possible, right? They're really looking for an objective view as to who you are. Again, reach out to your counselor if you have questions about that, as far as which schools need what. They're going to be really helpful for that as well, but your counselor should be one of those recommenders on that application as well.
This is
Sticking with the schools.
also something where your school may use a separate piece of software. These are frequently called score or naviance to help gather and distribute those letters of recommendation. That's one of the reasons why we really emphasize having students reach out to their school counselors, because how those two pieces of software talk to each other can be configured just a little bit differently at every single high school.
Moral of the story, talk to your counselor for sure. They're a great resource. They're here for you, and they will know the ins and outs of what's supposed to happen. We're sticking with the schools tab here, but talking about the school-specific essays. It is really important that you go through each of these steps in that school-specific tab and answer every single question. Again, what term are you applying to? Are you applying to live on campus? What majors are you applying to? Because sometimes bad actor schools will have secret hidden essays that pop up once you fill in that you're actually applying for an engineering major. And surprise, there's an extra essay for you there. So it really makes sense for you to click through everything, take stock of which essays you have to write, and then start thinking about them. Nobody wants to be scrambling last minute to write an essay that you didn't know existed. Sometimes there will be a very clear writing tab where there is a writing supplemental tab under the school's specific tab as well. Sometimes they're buried a little bit. Either way, click through and see what's there. Many of these essays do not change year to year. In fact, we've seen a little bit of a decrease in essays where some schools are taking away essays. At the same time, it's still really important to double check and make sure that there are some, whether rather there are some essays for the schools that you're planning on applying to. When you do start writing those essays, they kind of generally fall into several different categories, including the personal statement. Again, that goes to every single school. That's not on the schools tab, that's on the writing tab, as we talked about earlier. One of the schools tabs and one of the types of school-specific essays is the why college or why you're a major. Why do you want to go here? Why do you want to study what you want to study? That's your opportunity to be really specific about that school and your specific academic interest. Schools will ask about a community as well, maybe their community, maybe a community that you're a part of. It really depends on what the prompt is specifically, but that's a general category as well. Lots of schools are asking, what's your most important activity? And this isn't trying to be tricky. It really is just asking you what you care about and what sort of things you do after school or outside of your academics that are really important to you too. And then miscellaneous fun questions as well. These can be anything from what brings you joy to Chicago's famous question, the one I always remember is, what wisdom would a wisdom tooth give? I think those are kind of fun. Some students don't, and it's totally up to you, right? But there are some kind of miscellaneous categories depending on which schools you're applying to. As far as an update, some schools have changed or removed essays. Again, August 1st is typically the time where we're seeing the Common Application and seeing what changes have come. Some schools have published and given out some press releases about their schools changing essay prompts or removing them. So depends on which schools you're applying to, but do click through if you are a senior and see what things have changed, just to make sure that you know what you're being asked to do as you start to write those essays. Also, something a little bit newer this year is talking about glimpse and video essays, especially with the wake of AI. It's really important that colleges understand who you are as a person. So they offer video interviews through a program called Glimpse. And it's, again, becoming a little bit more popular, where you're given just a couple of minutes to give a short video essay as to who you are. Schools like Brown, Duke, Vanderbilt, BU, WashU, they all recommend or have the option to send in these video essays. It's not a part of the Common Application, but it is still something that has to do with the supplemental process. And again, we just want to let you know about this because this is something that is offered for the schools specifically. Sometimes there are a few different document deadlines as far as when you have to submit these, not only your supplemental essays, but also these glimpse essays as well. So take a look again at each of the institutions that you're thinking about using this for, and make sure that you're submitting them on time as well. When it comes to actually recording the video essays, for the most part, this is a video personal statement. A lot of them really just want to know who you are generally, what's an important topic to you, who you are when you're going to be on campus, and what you're doing when you walk around campus, things like that. Think about your application as a holistic piece of information too, right? Think about what stories you have already written, not only for your personal statement, but also for your supplemental essays as well. And then try to choose something different. Because think of it from the admission officer side. If they're just learning the same thing about you from your glimpse as from your supplemental essay, that's not really the best use of time, right? So think about something that you haven't already talked about in your glimpse as well. think about your presentation as well. You don't necessarily have to have a professional videographer and pyrotechnics in the background, but make sure that you have a quiet space that you can record something well, you're well lit, the background isn't wild and crazy. Make sure that that space looks good because again, you're putting yourself out there and presenting yourself as well. And then practice. You don't necessarily have the prompts in front of you, but just make sure that you know generally what you're going to say. Have a couple of ideas of things that you can pull out if you need to, and then just think about those as you move forward into those video submission essays. So we've gone through all of the parts of the common application. Now, Kevin, what do we do when we are ready to submit the application specifically?
Right. So you've done all this hard work, filling out all these sections in the application, right? And when do you submit? Now, that largely depends on the application plan you're following. And so what that means is that there's different ways you can submit an application as far as an application plan. I've listed them here. The first we'll mention is rolling admissions. What that means is that within a few weeks, I mean, it depends school to school, within roughly a few weeks of receiving your application, a university will make a decision on whether they will accept you. So, or accept you, reject you, or potentially defer that decision for a later point in time. But what that looks like is you want to submit those early because part of the decision making for those universities is how many open seats do they have available. So a lot of our students are thinking about Pitt because it is a rolling admissions school. And if they apply, let's say in October versus February, there's more seats left in the incoming class in October than there are in February, where a lot of students have already applied in. So instead of having to be maybe one of the best 100 or 1,000 or however many seats left remaining students who are applying, they instead that decision is made more on where are they at now, given there's a lot of seats available. So it's good to apply early to rolling admissions schools. But with that said, early is more generous than you may think. I've had students reach out to me the past couple of weeks. Should I, if I don't submit Pitt or another rolling admissions school right this minute, is it the end of the world? No, it is not, right? Whether you submit now, whether you submit a few weeks from now, or even September or October, most of the seats of the incoming class will still be available, okay? So don't stress yourself out thinking you have to get in an application today for those schools, especially if it's going to cause you to submit an application that's half-baked. Now, if you're not applying rolling admissions, what other options are there? Well, another major thing as far as applying early is early action and early decision. Typically, that is at a set, so that is at a set deadline. Typically, that's November 1st. Some universities do it a little bit sooner or a little bit later, but that's the major deadline there. And as far as that, as long as you get it in before the deadline, you're solid, you're golden, because they are going to take in all those applications for that early action, early decision round, and make decisions based on incoming applicants accordingly with the whole cohort in mind. The only kind of thing I do want to mention here is be aware that early decision is a very serious commitment in that you are making a contractual commitment if you're applying early decision to withdraw your other applications if you are accepted to that school. So while it is early and there's you want to rush that decision, do consider it seriously before committing to someplace and applying early decision. As far as those early action, early decision schools, a final thing we want to mention is that while, yes, you're okay as long as you get it in by the deadline, you need to be wary of document deadlines. What does that mean? A document deadline is essentially, for some schools or universities, they're going to want all your materials in. So it's not enough just to have hit submit before November 1st for these schools. They're going to want to have your transcript, or perhaps your test scores, those extra documents or official documents that get sent in. Penn State is a great example of a school that's going to want all those materials before they start reading your application and considering you for that early round. So you definitely want to target before that last minute. You definitely want to be reaching out earlier or initiating these processes earlier, sending in a formal test score, sending in a transcript well before that deadline to make sure it gets there in time. So
it is also worth noting, something that I would say when I was an undergraduate admission officer, that you have to click submit twice. You have to click submit on the common application, and you have to click submit on these supplemental essays specifically on that schools tab. So you're clicking submit twice for each school to make sure that it actually goes through.
That's a great point. That is a great point. I think another thing we do want to mention as well is technology is not perfect. Why do I bring this up? Do not wait until November 1st to actually submit the thing. Because the last thing anybody needs is for the Common App website to go down, or for you to lose power or internet access at your home, or for whatever 1,001 things that could potentially go wrong. So while you're fine submitting, in October, in this example, try to target at least a few days before. So if anything does go wrong as you're trying to submit, you run into any issues, you still have a window to address that before the deadline. Now, finally, the other application plan you can make is for the regular decision or early decision 2 round. That typically regular decision is, it's basically it is the deadline, right? It is kind of if you're asking what is the deadline to apply to university, usually people are referring to regular decision, meaning that they will not consider applications after that. So, that's something to keep in mind. That date for that regular decision is usually around January 1st. As with early action and early decision, some universities have it a few days earlier, some universities have it a few days later. Make sure to check on that front for the university you're targeting, but January 1st is kind of around the time you need to look. As a final note on that piece of things, though, is early decision 2. Now, as far as what early decision 2 is, like early decision 1, it is a contractual commitment you're making to a university. And you're saying that, hey, if I'm accepted to your university, I will withdraw all my other applications. It just has a later deadline. So it's the same type of commitment. There is, depending on the school, at least some, it's a bit of an admissions boost. How much it is does depend on the school, to be fair. But just be aware that if you're doing that, you are making the same contractual commitment. And as a final note on this, because I have gotten this question a few times, you will kind of hear back on your early action, early decision 1, if you apply, before that November 1st deadline, is sometime early mid-December. So you would have potentially the option, and you were therefore released. If you are rejected to your early decision 1 school, you're released from that early decision 1 commitment. So you could, if it makes sense for your family and your student, your future, you could apply early decision 2 if you were rejected. Important distinction. You can apply early decision 2 if you were rejected early decision 1. You have that option in your pocket. Now, a final thing before you submit, now that you kind of know when to submit, a few final notes, okay? First off, before you hit the final submit, read out everything in that application out loud and double check it. As you are going through this process and you've looked at your education section or your activities list, 10 times, it's very easy to kind of miss something as you're reading over it, and reading something out loud is a great way to make sure you don't miss it. Double check the factual details as a family, because maybe there are small things, social security number, something about an activity, etc., that maybe one person remembers and another one doesn't. Finally, as far as that essay, that personal statement, that main essay that goes to all schools, and to be fair, other essay, your other supplemental essays as well, you want to copy and paste that into the application, into that website, into that portal. Don't link them a doc where they have to go somewhere else to find it. Copy and paste it into the application portal itself. Now, after you submit this application, so hey, done all the steps, right? You figured out when you're going to submit. You did that final check. So that you can submit a great application. All right, afterwards, now what, right? Make sure you're checking your voicemail, your email, your snail mail, meaning mail at your physical address, because those are the ways the universities will reach out to you. As a reminder, when you are setting up your Common App account, we do recommend, it is important to use an email that you will continuously have access to. So if, for example, there's severe limitations on your school email and you may have issues accessing it as you're waiting to hear back from the university, you may want to use a personal one, right? So make sure that you have access, make sure you're checking, because you don't want to miss an acceptance letter if it comes through. Additionally, as well, make sure that you've set up and checked your application portal properly. And also as well, right? Don't panic. if some of the supplemental materials that you have as part of your application, your transcript, your scores, your rec letters, take a little bit of time to arrive. Just try to plan for it, right? To make sure things get there in the time that are required by the universities. As a final note, after you submit, often it's, well, not often, sometimes you'll have universities request additional forms. One is what Jordan mentioned earlier, which is a STARS form, which is just getting at your academic record, providing more context there. Sometimes they'll request additional essays. Typically, that's something that comes into play if you apply for a specialized program, like an honors college or a pre-professional program like a BSMD. Sometimes that then prompts the school to ask you to fill out an additional essay or an additional portal as part of that process. So those are the steps to submit and what to look out for afterwards. Now I'm going to kick things back to Alyssa to talk about how we can help you with this process.
Yes, so we are at this point taking on our last 20 rising seniors for the year. So if you are not already working with us and you would like to, please use one of the 2 consultation links that we've dropped in the chat to sign up to chat with us. We work with students on every single step of the essay process, from brainstorming to outlining to drafting to revising to doing that final polish and proofread before your student reads everything out loud and copies and pastes it onto the application. Don't use a Google Drive link. But we also provide college counseling. We can have those conversations about, what makes sense as far as early decision 1, early decision 2, any other questions on your mind, as well as project managing the entire process. We set deadlines, we follow up, we do the nagging so parents don't have to, as well as providing comprehensive resources on the application process. I think the last time we did this count, we have over 60 pages of resources that we provide exclusively to students to help them fill out the STARS report, know how to self-report their SAT and ACT scores, send official scores, talk about the optional sections. So we can help with every part of this process. We tell students that they don't get rid of us until they text us a picture of them in the sweatshirt of the school they committed to. So thank you for hanging out with us at this point. Please feel free to drop any questions you have, preferentially into the Q&A section. We're going to start off by clearing the handful of questions that we have in the chat. So if you drop something in the chat after that point, we may or may not see it. So preferentially, if you have questions, go ahead and drop those into the Q&A section. And we're going to start off with Kevin, since you talked about the testing section. So do you self-report the ACT or do you need to send your official scores?
I mean, the short answer is you're probably going to have to do both, but it depends on the school, right? So some schools are really going to want that official score. So you're gonna have to put in a score in that section no matter what, but some schools are going to want an official test report. And just as a quick reminder for MJ, that's going to be from the ACT, not from College Board. College Board, if you're sending official scores from the SAT or AP exams, that will be through College Board.
All right. Jordan, if I have awards from an academic extracurricular, can I put those in the educational honors section or do I put those under activities?
The most common answer in college admissions is it depends. It depends on if you have a lot of details and things that you specifically did in that activity. If so, then yes, you can put it in the honors section. If you don't have a ton to put in the activity description itself, then yes, you can put those honors in the activity description itself. Our train of thought is generally to put it in the honors section so that you give yourself full credit for everything else that you did, and then put the academic awards in that honors section, just so again, you can give yourself the space for that.
We have a note from a parent who's visited some schools and heard differing responses about letters of recommendation, where it is true not every school is going to want letters of recommendation directly from junior year core subject teachers. It's the recommendation we make generally because the majority of schools are going to ask for those. But some schools, UT Austin is the one that comes to mind for me, will specifically ask for letters of recommendation from different people in this case, more so a mentor, someone that the student interned with, a boss at a job. So as Jordan said, the most common answer is going to be it depends. This is something that's absolutely worthwhile to check, either with us if you're working with us or by checking on the school's admissions website. All right. Let's see. Kevin, if a student has too many experiences to include in the activities section, should they include them in the additional space provided or just delete them?
I I hate that we're doing this, but I have to default to Jordan's answer because it is the correct answer here. It depends. Now, what does it depend on? The answer is like, do you have much to say about those remaining activities? Is it an activity that is like very meaningful or impressive that you spend a lot of time on, or is it, hey, I participated in a 5K charity march for a couple hours, charity walk for a couple hours, and I didn't have an additional space for it, right? If it's the former, right, because maybe you're just involved with 1,000 different activities and you're also the president of this club and it didn't make it, there is an additional information section where you might want to put that information, right? That could work. But as I said, if it's an example like the 5K, where I just participated once for 2 hours, I never thought about it again, maybe you just eliminate that, right? But the shortest answer is it depends.
All right. Jordan, I'm going to combine the next couple of questions for you to talk about sort of the honors section. So, honors outside of school, academic honors, Conrad Breakthrough Challenge, or honors societies outside of National Honor Society, Spanish National Honors, Math National Honors. Where do these also belong in the honors tab of the education section?
Yes, those can absolutely go there because they are academic in nature. Keep in mind that you only get 5 slots for those honors sections as opposed to the 10 slots for the common application activities section, which is where you could put all the activities and things like that. So if you have 5 things, great. If you have 3, that's okay. If you have 0, that's also okay. But yes, things like honors societies, Spanish honor society, the math honor society, or any sort of academic competitions can absolutely go into the honors section there.
All right. I'm gonna grab our next two here. Um, Someone asked, if I submit to a rolling admission school in August, can I change my essay and senior year courses when I apply to other colleges later? So there's two halves to this question. One, once you apply to a school, you hit submit, that school receives a snapshot of your application as it was when you hit submit. So, for instance, you could apply to a rolling admission school in early August, then decide that you're bored and want to entirely rewrite your personal statement. Please don't do that to us, to yourself, to anyone, but you could make changes to your essay or get a new leadership position and need to update your extracurriculars in a more positive way. Make those updates in the Common App itself, and then when you click submit after that point, say you apply to some schools on October 15th for that November 1st early action deadline, those schools will then see that snapshot of the application as it stood when you hit submit. So they will receive the updated version. That being said, if you are changing your senior year classes, this is something that a friendly email to your admissions officer just to keep them in the loop would definitely be worthwhile, simply to let the let the admissions officer know that something substantial has changed, as, courses and grades in those courses is one of the most important factors that an admissions officer takes a look at when they're making a decision about a student. All right. We also had a question of if I want to submit SAT scores to only some of the schools I'm applying to and not all of them, should you enter the SAT scores in Common App? So, Jordan, I see you nodding. You want to take this one?
Yeah, it's a good question because you think that like, oh, it gets sent everywhere. However, if there are schools that you're applying to test optional, in the schools tab, there's a question that per school that says, are you submitting test scores? If you say no, their systems then block the testing section from being visible to the admission officer when they read the application. To be safe, however, if you don't want to chance it, don't put it on the common application and then just send your official testing to everywhere you're submitting it. But just so you know, there is a failsafe.
All right. Perfect. Um, I will tackle Kevin, I'll let you handle this one. If my child studied abroad the second semester of 10th grade, does this need to go under the change in progression? It didn't change, they didn't change schools when they returned, and it didn't affect their continuation into 11th grade.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the important factor here is what's actually going to show up in transcripts, right? Because that section when just so we're all on the same page for the education section, there's an optional section where if a student attended multiple schools, you may have to fill that out. So it depends what's going to show up in the transcript there. If it's just like someone did a course, right, and you just happen to be doing that course in Italy, right? It's probably not necessary to fill out that section, but if it's something showing up like a dual enrollment with like a community college in Italy, or like you were at a different school in Italy, that's part of your overall transcripts that are going to be sent, you may need to fill that out. And it's not a negative, it's just to provide context for what's going on so that when this is being processed from the other side of the desk, admissions office or office registrar is trying to figure out what's going on, they're not confused.
Perfect. So I'm going to actually combine a couple of different questions here about activities and sports and when it makes sense to combine them and when it doesn't make sense to combine them. So, um, if your child plays the same sport on two different teams or plays, and that's often the most common one. Does it make sense to combine these? Or if you volunteer with a couple of different organizations, when does it make sense to combine these? This would be the case of A, you are already in a position where you have filled up all of your 10 activities. Um, and also that your activity descriptions are going to be notably similar. When the role you played in your club volleyball team and the role you played in your high school volleyball team are going to look practically identical. This would be one of the moments where it would make sense to combine these. If you have additional significant activities beyond that point, that is what the additional information section is for. And if you are simply a wonder child, there is just a point where you're going to have to cut something because the Common App does, in fact, limit us to a certain number of characters and a certain number of activities. All right. Um, Kevin, can you ED2 to a school if you were waitlisted or deferred to your ED1 school?
Yes, because if you are not accepted to that ED1 school, right, you are released from that contractual commitment that you made. So you can apply elsewhere, you can apply ED2. You're making it because you're no longer bound by a contractual commitment to commit to one school, if accepted. So you can make that commitment elsewhere. Yeah.
All right, we have a question about the Kelly Prospect inventory. which for those of you who may not be aware, the Kelly Prospect Inventory, yes, it's KPI. Someone at the business school was really pleased with that acronym when they came up with it. Is functionally a personality test used by Kelly School of Business at Indiana University as part of their application process. Um, this is something that is new as of last year. If our colleague Tara Tarini, who was not able to join us tonight, did a fabulous breakdown of this inventory. It's available on our education library. At this point, this is the only business school that we have seen do something like this, but we always are trying to keep abreast of our coming trends. All right. I'm going to answer just our next question here about adding letters of recommendation. This is something where specifically for music teachers and music supplements, this is something that is going to vary from school to school, both in the sense of your high school will handle this differently, as well as school to school in the sense of different colleges and universities will collect their portfolio in a different way. This is absolutely a moment where I would reach out to your school counselor, to the admissions office at the school that you are applying to, or your essay coach, and we can do the phone calls for you. All right. Jordan, tell us about reporting schools. When you self-report, I'm going to say the SAT and ACT, just so this applies to everyone. Would you report the super score or the highest score? And when do you report AP scores?
For SATs and ACTs, you should absolutely report the super score because you want to give the highest score that's there. The way that the testing section works is that you do have to put in each individual sitting of the SAT and ACT so they can see that you took it twice, and then you have the two scores from each section creating the super score. So again, report the super score that's there. For the AP scores, you can self-report those on the Common Application itself, also in the testing section. You can also put the future score or tests that you are planning on taking. So again, if you're in AP Environmental Science in 12th grade, you can say that you're going to take that exam in May, but you obviously don't have the score for that yet. And then you only have to send official AP scores to the school that you are matriculating to. And when you're saying, I'm going here, here are the official scores, because that's when they then give you credit. They don't need those official scores for the most part at the onset of your application.
All right. Kevin, I'm going to combine a couple of questions about the honors section. So, what type of honors don't go in the honors tab of the education section? And as a follow-up, could we put arts honors in the honors section?
Yeah, no, great question. So the short answer is anything that's not academic or intellectually focused, right, probably doesn't go there. It's the short answer here. So if you made the all district team in lacrosse, doesn't go there, right? If you won best chamber orchestra ensemble, right, then unfortunately does not go there, which does get to the arts question as well. However, this person did ask this question in context of going to an art school and having fewer academic opportunities, the type of things that might go traditionally in an honors section. And for that person, first off, having an essay coach, college counselor is very helpful, because what I would advise that student to do is to maybe think about the challenges and circumstances section. You're not the first student I've come across who maybe went to a specialized school, then changed directions, right? Because maybe you're looking at a future that is not in the arts, and your transcript doesn't quite meet that. It's okay to provide context for, I took the best, whatever, it's social science, language classes, STEM classes in my school and tried to max it out, but I'm at an art school and there's limitations there. It's totally fine to use that section for that.
All right, I'll answer this next one. Does Common App show me my weighted and unweighted GPA? So let's start off by saying Common App is not going to show you your GPA. You are going to enter your GPA, which you will have from your transcript or your school counselor, into Common App. You have the option in the Education tab to provide either your weighted or your unweighted GPA. Um, you can choose whichever. This is something that will not carry a huge amount of weight because you are going to either send your official transcript or enter your transcript in STARS or the courses and grades section, or possibly do both of these things, at which point the college or university that you are applying to is going to take your transcript and recalculate your GPA entirely according to their own peculiar and idiosyncratic method of doing things based on what they have determined is most useful for them and their process. So you'll put your GPA in, you can do either weighted or unweighted. Um, the GPA that your college will be thinking about is going to be an entirely different beast whatsoever. Jordan, how do I describe numbers of hours per week for an activity if it's a seasonal activity? And I'm going to add on to this because I know this is a common question. And what if I do an activity where it is a disparate amount of hours? Like I do theater and usually it's 3 hours a week, and then the week before um we start production, it's Hell Week, and I'm there for 40 hours a week. How do I handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an average across the entire year. It's a rough average. Realistically, no admission officer is going to whip out a calculator and say, you're 1 hour over. At the same time, though, it should be realistic to not only give yourself full credit for the amount of work that you do, but also to not exceed the amount of waking hours in a week per year and things like that. So, again, average out your involvement in that situation where it's 40 hours 1 week, but then 3 the rest. Maybe you say 6 hours a week. Maybe you write in the activity description that involvement goes up during tech week or things like that. Whatever you might want to use, this might actually be a good place for the additional information section as well. You can denote not only the average, but also put elsewhere in your application saying, hey, just so you know, I actually have a way higher this 1 week once a year or once a semester for this activity.
For truly seasonal activities, maybe you're one of those lucky people that gets to work at Rita's Water Ice when it opens over the summer. There is a place in the Common App activities section where you can specify weeks per year. So, for instance, if you work at Rita's Water Ice for 12 weeks out of the year, you put down 12 weeks, and then the number of hours per week, it only applies to those 12 weeks. So if you work 20 hours a week for those 12 weeks, you put 20 hours for 12 weeks. You don't need to average it across the year in that instance. All right. Um, Kevin, if I attended a 4 credit summer program at a university, for instance, do I need to submit my grade for that? And do I need to send an official transcript?
Yeah. So first off, before you even talk about submitting a transcript, you're going to want to include that in the education section of your Common App. As you go there is the option, whether it's a summer program like this, or maybe some of our students took a course at a local community college. There is the option to go into that education section. You can highlight that you can select from the menus, right, that you took these college credit courses, and select that and self-report to start, right? And then, yes, you probably, their policies do vary school to school, to be fair, but there probably is going to be a school, if you're applying to a bunch, that is going to want an official transcript. So you should probably start that process of getting an official transcript that speaks to those credits.
All right. Jordan, if I'm applying early decision to one school, can I apply early action to other schools?
You absolutely can. The only thing you cannot do is apply to any single or rather more than one restrictive policy school at the same time. Not all of them are called the same thing. There's early action, as we talked about beforehand, But then there's the weird single choice early action or restrictive early action, where they ask you not to apply to multiple schools that have this policy and or to schools that have binding policies as well. For the most part, though, you could apply to one early decision school, which is the binding agreement, and as many early action agreements, which are again non-binding, that you would like to apply to. Ask your counselor, ask us if you're working with us if you have questions, but for the most part, yes, you can do as many early actions as you would like.
Yes, going to stress there, if you are thinking about applying to a restrictive early action school or a single choice early action school, definitely speak to us, speak to your school counselor about that. That particular category is a little bit of the Wild West in the sense that every single school that offers single choice or restrictive early action has their own nuances to that policy. So it's definitely worth reaching out to us or a school counselor. And then last but not least, if we are applying to rolling admissions, can we do so without our letters of recommendation, future schedule, and ACT, then add it when we get them? So, in many ways, this is going to go back to one of the things that Kevin said that yes, you should apply early to an early decision school, but early is generous. Anytime in August or September is going to be a great time to apply to a rolling admissions school, especially for a schedule. I would wait to have your senior year schedule before you apply. Um, your letters of recommendation, you can submit your application without those being ready to go. You can then monitor those letters coming in. It's just that that application won't be considered complete, even though you've submitted your end, until the letter of recommendation is there. All right. I think those are all of the questions that we have for the moment. We just saw one person sneak in. Nicely done. The ACT in October. We have a question about, is it okay to take the ACT in October and still apply early decision? For that one, it is going to depend on the school. ACT takes a little bit longer to release their decisions than SAT. It can take longer than 10 days, so there may be schools where you are not able to get that October ACT score in time for a November 1st application date. The SAT for October is generally accepted by all schools as well as the September ACT, but the October ACT, not the SAT, is a little bit finicky. That seems like a great way to demonstrate some interest and to send an email to an admissions officer at your college of choice. All right, now I believe those are all of the questions that we had. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we will be sharing the YouTube link for this after, we'll be sending it out sometime tomorrow. Please feel free to share this with anyone you think may find it helpful. Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.